What's the point of gathering irrefutable video evidence of someone who is a public servant, or even an ordinary citizen, willingly and knowingly violating your civil rights if you don't make them answer for their wrongdoing in the only place that matters, a court of law? Being shamed on YouTube might cause a person, officer, department, or agency some embarrassment for a short time, but embarrassment is not a remedy. And YouTube does not clarify law, does not set legal precedent, and does not create a permanent legal record. Nor can YouTube punish any entity by taking money from them and giving it to you. Everything dealing with government revolves around money. There is no better example of this than the case of Gregory Reiser versus the Point Marion, Pennsylvania Police Department. Point Marion officer Kevin Lucart, previously fired from another department for exposing himself to a 17-year-old, arrested Mr. Reiser in 2012 for recording him using his cell phone and charged him with wiretap law violations long after the courts had declared such an arrest illegal. The case became quite interesting when Mr. Reiser was arrested a second time after complaining to the department chief, so you may want to research it further. Prior to trial, the insurance provider for Point Marion settled the case with Mr. Reiser for $65,000. There are conflicting stories of the insurance premium required to operate the police department going from $2,000 to $20,000 and the city not being able to afford the required insurance, or that insurance provider and others simply refusing to provide services after the settlement. Either way, now uninsured, the small department had to be disbanded. I'd call that justice. But without a federal suit being filed, nothing would have changed, and Mr. Reiser would not have been $65,000 richer, minus attorney fees, of course. Most citizens believe it takes legal experts and a lot of money to avail themselves of the judicial system. It does not. Today, every criminal defendant in America who cannot afford an attorney is provided one because of Clarence Earl Gideon, a poor, petty criminal in his 50s with only an 8th grade education who was jailed in 1961 after being convicted of a crime because he was expected to represent himself at trial against an educated, trained, and experienced attorney. With only the meager resources of a Florida jailhouse law library and a pencil, Mr. Gideon wrote a petition to the U.S. Supreme Court stating his case for civil rights violations. In 1963, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously in his favor. Amazingly, prior to uneducated Mr. Gideon doing so, no lawyer or legal scholar thought to present a similar argument before that high court. If you have a lawyer willing to represent you, use them. But no, a lawyer is not required when your rights are violated. You have access to the internet, a much better resource than a 1960s jailhouse law library. You have much better means of producing a document than the pencil Mr. Gideon used, and hopefully you have more than his 8th grade education. If you aren't capable of doing what Mr. Gideon did, file a civil rights suit yourself and bring an action in federal court, then you need to shut the fuck up, sit down, and stay home. This is the government website where you can download the form to file a civil rights suit with the proper United States District Court. You can use it by filling in the blanks, or you can use it as an outline, along with what you cut and paste from the thousands of documents available online from cases that are about events similar to your own. This is PACER, Public Access to Court Electronic Records. Create a citizen account, and the wealth of resources at your fingertips will astound you. There are many other databases to assist you. Do not wait to file a civil rights suit. In some circumstances, you must file within 120 days, in others you have up to 1 year. So file within 120 days. Your petition to the court does not have to be eloquently written or written in legalese, just truthful and complete. You could file a complaint with the Department of Justice instead. If I know my rights have been violated, I don't need an agency to conduct an investigation. And the government finding fault and finding someone or some entity does not put a dime in my pocket. I want justice for me. So I am filing suit in federal court and demanding dollars. I may also demand specific performance, such as a department's officers being retrained on a particular aspect of citizens' rights, maybe even a public apology from the offending officer and their department. One absolute demand would be the offending person or persons admitting their wrongdoing. If you can't afford the filing fees and other charges associated with a federal suit, this is where you find the forms to fill out so the government will waive all of those and your suit costs you nothing. Again, just fill it out accurately and truthfully. Mr. Reiser had the assistance of the ACLU against Point Marion, Pennsylvania. But his case was so absolute he could have easily filed it for himself. The facts of the events would have remained the same, and the insurance carrier would have still settled out of court before ever letting a jury decide how much money to award Mr. Reiser to properly punish the blatantly out-of-control police department. Did I mention someone in the department removed the SIM card containing the damning evidence against the officer from Mr. Reiser's phone before it was returned to him after his arrest? Or don't sue anybody for violating your rights, and be happy just being a YouTube star with a few thousand views and likes while you beg for cash with a GoFundMe campaign. What an accomplishment. All uneducated Clarence Gideon and his pencil did was make every cop in America state the third and fourth sentences of the Miranda warning. Oh, after Mr. Gideon's conviction was set aside, of course the state of Florida retried him, and being properly represented in court, Mr. Gideon was acquitted. His name also became immortalized in law. That's an accomplishment.